All right, let's talk about authority. Now, remember, the great thing about the crab test is that these are letters you're using to evaluate sources before you even read the source most of the time. You can tell if it's current just by looking at the date. You can tell if it is a low-level source, oftentimes by how short it is or by the prevalence of images instead of actual content, right? You don't have to read the whole thing to tell that. And authority is the same way. To figure out authority, you're not going to read the actual article. You're going to try to learn more about the author because, as it says here, most periodicals and as well as academic journals, when they have authors, they include information about the author, which shows why they are credible. If you can't find an author, if there is not a named author, for example, if this was by the LA Times editorial board, we could figure out what makes the LA Times credible, right? So let's go ahead and practice that. Before we get into that, of course, I didn't include the Mashable one in here, right? Because we already decided it was a low-level source. It's not worth looking at. But if we wanted to look at the authority, right, you could look at the authors, and I think you would probably find these are not people who have won the Pulitzer Prize. They're probably not even journalists by trade. I'm having trouble even finding an author in here. This is interesting as well, this thing here where it explains that they basically get paid to list these dating sites here. It's just a big advertisement, clickbait thing. Mashable is junk. Peace out, Mashable. Okay, so let's talk about authority. Okay, authority is on a continuum. It's not that LA Times is not authoritative and this one is. That's not the case. Okay, but if you've done the things I asked here, I'm hoping that you see this has more authority, right? These authors have more authority than this author, and the journal itself has more authority than the LA Times does. They're both good enough to use, right? They're both much better than the Mashable one that I just got rid of, right? But let's demo really quickly how you do authority testing, right? So here's your academic journal. You can see the authors' names are highlighted. If you click them, it tells you that they are faculty members at universities. It tells you what department they're in, and then you realize, aha, they must have a terminal degree in this field of study. So these are not just ordinary people writing about online dating. These are people who specialize in telecommunication and information studies, or at least Professor Ellison does. Right? And so, of course, she has a great deal of credibility to write about this topic, as these other authors do, right? And then you wonder, well, what the heck is this? What is this thing, right? And again, we can click on it. What is the Journal of Computer Mediated Communication, right? And we can try to find a little bit more about it. It is part of the International Communication Association, which we don't know what that is. We would need to read more about that, right? How could we find out more about that? Well, again, you can often find about pages, whether it's a periodical like the LA Times or an academic journal. You can find out more about what they do. And when you go here, you say, oh, I see, it's peer reviewed. There's multiple people that check these things for accuracy, right? They've been around since 1995. This is clearly not some random person's blog, right? There's a lot of work that goes into ensuring the accuracy of these things. Highly, highly authoritative. Let's do LA Times, right? So we go in here. Here's our writer, Amina Khan. It says staff writer. So we know right away she works for the LA Times. She's probably a journalist. Let's click her name and try to find out a little bit more about her. Okay, so she's a science writer. So that's good because the topic of the article has to do with science, right? If she's a sports writer and they put her on the online dating assignment, we would be a little concerned. We would say, this is not your area, right? And so we can see other things that she has covered in the past. Okay, they did put some kind of funny things about her here, right? Which are less professional, but then again, remember they have a popular audience here, so they're a little bit less formal and stuffy than an academic journal, right? Again, you can see she's not new, right? There's lots of other things that she's written for the LA Times, right? So she's got some authority. Again, more than the folks at Mashable, not as much as these folks, right? What about the LA Times? Who the heck are they? Why do we care about what's a paper from Los Angeles says, right? Well, here's their main page. Let's see if they have an about link here at the bottom. Yes, they do. So you go to the about link, or you could just type LA Times about us, right? So I click about, and it tells me they have 2 million people reading the thing every Sunday, 30 million visitors to the website. That is a lot of people. There's a lot of people reading this newspaper. They have a lot of reach. They've been covering Southern California for more than 138 years. All right. So that sort of speaks to their credibility to some degree as well, right? They've been around for a long time. This is not something that sprung up yesterday. This is clearly not a pretend periodical that somebody is setting up for parody or for fake news. It's clearly a legitimate periodical, right? And we can go further in this. You could even go into, you know, political analyses of these. I'm not asking you to do this, but of course, the LA Times tends to lean to the left. It's more liberal than something like the Wall Street Journal, which tends to lean to the right, which is more conservative. Right? Both of those periodicals are credible. Both of them are authoritative. They just come from different parts of the political spectrum. All right, I hope that you found this helpful. Again, you are going to come across sources that do not have enough authority. If you find a source in the library, it's probably going to have enough authority. You just have to be sure it's long enough at the right level, right? If you find something on Google, it's the Wild West out there. You have to be sure, you have to do this work with the crap test to be sure that the authors have the right level of authority. That's all I've got. Let's get back to the rest of the letters in crap test.